Meet Spectre, the ghost of Christmas present, and his sweet dog, Spirit. Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm joining Indiana Jones and lots of other fabulous crafters for the Christmas Palooza collaboration. You'll find links to Annie's channel, as well as the playlist in the description box. I'm sure by now, you've all seen these adorable dog walking ghosts. They are everywhere and they are really cute. I decided to put a Christmas spin on this trend. We're going to make ours for just a few pennies. Let's get into it. I'll be using Model Magic, of course. And I have here a scrap piece from a Dollar Tree styrofoam cone. The top was used in another project. This is going to be our ghost. And I also have here a piece of a packing noodle, which is kind of like a pool noodle, but you know, used for packing. Which I've cut down to about 2 inches, and I cut the bottom flat. I also took a little bit off each side. It's sort of in the shape of a loaf of bread, and we're going to use this for the puppy. Right. So first things first, I grabbed a handful of Model Magic clay, which I roll into a ball. I want this ball to be large enough to sit on top of the cone. This is going to round out the top of our ghost's head. I flatten the bottom of it just a wee bit so that it will sit flush on the top of the cone. Now I'm going to push a toothpick into the cone, and then I'll push the clay ball on top of the toothpick. And I make sure that it's well stuck to the cone. I'm going to shape it until I'm happy with it. I just want it generally round. Okay, next I grab another big handful of clay. I'll knead it to condition it, and I'll roll it out with my brayer nice and thin. We're going to use this to create the pup's body sheet. So I cut a large square from the clay. I'm going to drape it over the packing noodle that we cut for Spirit's body. I'm just rolling it out a wee bit more. Just want to make sure it'll drape nicely over the foam, which I'm doing right here. I want the foam centered in the clay. And now I'm just going to shape the clay over the foam. And I'll fold in the clay at one end to kind of mimic ghostly paws in the front. Well, you'll see. I just kind of pinch them together. See, I'm just working them into a wee bit of a point. Now on the sides and here on the back end, I'm just making rippling folds. I want to create that draping effect that we see on a classic ghost. You know what I mean. So I'm just pinching the clay just a wee bit. There we go. Easy, right? To create Spirit's head, I roll a small ball of clay, and I'm going to elongate it slightly at one end by rolling it between my index finger and my thumb. This will form his muzzle. And I want the shape in the back of his head to remain round, so I have to keep kind of playing with that. I'm just going to keep going here until I get it just so. I'll use the end of a toothpick to anchor his head to his body by pushing it into the front of his body. And then I'm just going to push the head onto the toothpick. I want this to be removable, so I'm not going to glue it in or anything. We're just going to leave it as is. To create his ears, I roll out a small thin snake of clay. I cut it in half to create 2 ears, and I'm going to push those into place on his head. I'm giving the ears a slight downward curl, just a wee bit. I incorporate the ear with the head by rolling a paintbrush handle over the seam. And I'm going to repeat that with this here. Super easy and quick, right guys? Now let's make a tail for him. The inspiration piece, the pup doesn't have a tail, but I really thought it would add a nice detail to have a tail. So once again, I'm rolling out a small thin snake of clay, which I'll cut to size, and I'm just going to pop it right there onto his bum. See? Cute, right? We'll set him aside to dry. Now for Spectre, I rolled a very large handful of clay nice and flat. I wanted to be sure that I had plenty to generously drape over the cone. I just want to make sure that all the clay goes down completely around the cone all the way to the table. You feel me? So now I'm just spreading out that bottom, and I'm going to cut away any excess, keeping the bottom of the draping round. I don't want any angled ends. I'll come in and cut any of those off. I want to make sure that I still have enough clay to give him a really nice draping effect. Also, I make sure that the bottom of his sheet lies flat and level on the table so that he'll stand up straight. Okay, we're going to cut away that bit. That's a little pointy for my liking. To be honest, I really didn't have to do too much to this. The clay pretty much draped itself. I'm just going in and I'm going to try to condense the folds so that the clay is actually formed to the cone underneath. I want to make sure it has good contact. I'm telling you, gang, this was such an easy project. You've got to try it. To create his arms, I rolled a log of clay so that both ends are rounded and slightly tapered. And we're going to cut that in half. I place a piece of toothpick into his body where I want his arms to go. I push the toothpick in, and now the first arm into place. And I'll incorporate it by rolling over it with my paintbrush handle. Now let's get his other arm on. I want his arms to stick out in front of him somewhat. Okay, same deal. I'm going to incorporate it by rolling my paintbrush handle over it, and we're good to go. To create Spectre's stocking hat, I'll narrow one end of a small ball of clay into a rounded point, and I'm going to flatten the bottom by pressing it on the table. I keep rolling until the point is the right length, and I check proportions. The bottom needs to be wider, so I'm just going to manipulate the clay with my fingers until I'm happy with it. And we'll pop that right on his head. There we go. Just going to press it down a wee bit. Of course, his Santa hat is going to need fur trim, so I roll out another thin snake of clay, I wrap it around the base of his hat, and I cut away any excess, gently pressing it into place. I put wee dips in the fur lining to make it look like it's got some texture. I'm just using a ball stylus for this. A brush handle would work too. Oh, almost forgot. I rolled a small ball of clay to pop on the point of his hat as a pom-pom. And we're going to set him aside to dry. I let these guys dry overnight and they're ready for paint. Now, as these two fellows are ghosts, of course, they're going to get 2 coats of Ceramcoat white. Even though the clay is already white, I feel once it dries, it's not pure white, so I always base coat it no matter what. But also, I feel painting it gives it a more finished look. And I'm sure to get into all the creases and folds. The fur and the pom-pom on Spectre's hat are also going to be white. And I give the rest of his hat 2 coats of Ceramcoat watermelon. Of course, I want to accentuate all the folds on their sheet bodies, so I'll pull out my Folk Art floating medium. The medium is this clear gel here on my plate. I'm going to prep my brush with a healthy coat of the medium, just going to work it into the bristles. I'll side load my brush by scooping up some of the Tropic Bay Blue paint onto the very corner, and I'm going to stroke the brush on my plate, which will blend the medium with the paint on the bristles. By doing this, it gives me a gradient of color. The darkest color will be at the very corner of my brush where I loaded the paint, and it will fade as it moves toward the middle of the bristles. So I'm going to put the corner with the paint right there where the hat meets his head. That's where I want my darkest shadow. And I'm just going to float the color right around the base of his hat. I'll reload my brush whenever necessary with paint and or medium as needed. I'm going to float the blue around the bottom of the fur on his hat and where the pom-pom meets the red of the hat. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. Okay, now I'm going to float along all the creases on his body, around the bottom, catching all those creases and folds. Okay, right there I feel like that shading is a little too dark. So I'm going to grab a clean brush, dip it in my floating medium only, and just feather it out, just like that. It is definitely one of my most favorite things about the floating medium. It's very easy to correct your mistakes. So now we'll continue floating all the folds, and I'm also going to float around his arms where they meet his body. And again, I just feel like, you know, if a ghost had a shadow on his body, that's where it would be. Okay, let's float Spirit, our puppy. We'll float around his ears and all around the folds of the sheet. His sheet. I guess it's a sheet, right? Well, it's his body. And I'll do around his tail too. Look at that cute wee tail. Let's give Spectre his features. I dip a dowel into Tropic Bay and I dot on his cheeks. Boop. With a detail brush and Tropic Bay, I'm going to add wee lines where his eyes are going to go. Kind of hard to see, I know. And I'll paint in Spirit's smile with Tropic Bay too. Hippo Grey on the end of a paintbrush to dot in Spectre's eyes. I'll elongate them in the classic ghost fashion. We dot eyes for Spirit and a wee dot nose too. Boop. Cute. A quick, cockeyed, cheeky wee smile for Spectre. Nothing fancy, just simple U-shape. Both fellows will get Tropic Bay eyebrows, just little comma strokes. White dot highlights for their eyes, cheeks, and Spirit's nose. I have here DecoArt multi-purpose sealer. I'm going to seal both pieces with this by pouncing on with a cosmetic sponge. Simple. This sealer is a satin finish, so there is a wee bit of a shine to it. I tied a loop into a length of baker string. This is going to be Spirit's leash. I removed the head so I could pop the leash on, and I'm just going to slide the head back into place. There we go. Now I'll measure out the length I want for his leash. I'm going to tie a knot where I want the leash to end, and I'll cut off the excess. I attached the leash to Spectre's hands with 3-in-1 glue, and I'm also going to give him a candy cane in his other hand. And we'll pop that right into place. And of course, Spirit gets a candy cane. Good old Spirit. Back on with his head, and I added some holly to Spirit to give him a festive vibe, and a glittery bow tie for Spectre. They're off for a wee walk. Let's take a look at Spectre and Spirit, the ghost of Christmas present, and his phantom pup. I'm really pleased with these guys. I think they're really sweet. I hope you like them too. Please be sure to check out Annie's channel and the playlist. Both will be linked in the description box, and you'll find a list of my supplies there as well. And please show everyone some love with a thumbs up. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.